and the Health Secretary. But the point I've made in respect of all of them is that we have an effective regime, and we've have an effective regime for a number of reasons. First of all, we have massively ramped up the testing capacity. Off the back of that testing, we are ramping up the amount of tracing. Off the back of that tracing, we are ramping up massive numbers of people who are self-isolating, reducing the transmission risks. And a result of all of that, you see, day in, day out, on a rolling average basis, we are continuing to keep this disease under control. And in areas where there is a local spike, for example, in Leicester, we have imposed lockdowns. This is a process that is working to control the disease, and I think it's the right way to proceed. Now, thanks for those questions, Sam. Over to Dan Hewitt at ITV.
Good afternoon, Secretary of State. You have always said as a government you are led by the science. So can you tell us how the decisions you've come to today are still based on the science rather than just the very pressing needs of the economy? And a second, if I may, what data have you seen since Saturday, since the reopening of pubs and hairdressers and restaurants, etc., to inform you and suggest that it's safe to open up gyms, etc., in the coming weeks?
Well, thanks for both of those questions. Yes, of course, we continue to be informed by the science. And this afternoon, I had further extensive conversations with the Chief Medical Officer, Chris Whitty. In terms of how that has then affected the measures we've taken, and you'll see this in the guidelines that we publish in respect of gyms, but that has, for example, led us to advise to reduce class sizes. There's a particular transmission risks around the equipment, so making sure that equipment is cleaned properly. We need to ensure social distancing, and we need to take steps to improve ventilation. All of that has been guided by the science. In terms of the timings of this, clearly we have a rolling programme of reopening, and as that reopening continues, we continue to analyse the evidence and the data from it. And of course, that is one of the reasons why we are waiting a little bit longer in respect of the steps in respect of gyms, because we want this path to continue downwards, because the lower the incidence in the community at large, essentially the more risks you can take, the more you can start to open up, because the lower the numbers are in the community at large. And all of that is informed by the science. But any further?
Yeah, on the data, are you confident that the data you've seen so far suggests that this is safe to do what you're doing today? I mean, how much data could you have seen? Because speaking to a couple of scientists today, some on Sage suggested actually it might take a couple of weeks at least to see the data from last weekend to suggest you can make a new raft of changes.
Yes, of course. I mean, all the data is continuing to move in the right direction. So prior to the 4th of July, we announced a number of easements. We haven't seen as a result of those easements that the number is increasing. In fact, it continues to decline. And of course, we will continue to monitor the situation to ensure it continues to decline. But we are confident enough that as we continue on this trajectory, that by the 25th of July, we'll be in a situation where we can reopen gyms and other facilities in that way. We've always proceeded in a careful and cautious way. And of course, through all of this, if there is any evidence that of measures of incidents increasing, things going in the wrong direction, we won't hesitate to take steps. And the Health Secretary has set out a sort of escalation path for that, the sort of end point of which is local lockdowns if necessary. So thanks very much for those questions. Now I think we're on to Mesa Hall for the Express. Mesa.
Good afternoon, Secretary of State. Thank you very much. As people go back to the pools, the leisure centres and the gyms, they're going to find there are a lot more rules and regulations to worry about. For example, in swimming pools, there's no butterfly stroke, there's no overtaking. People are supposed to put on their trunks before they go to the pool. How are you going to persuade the doubters that sport and leisure isn't about to be a lot more hassle and a lot less fun than it used to be? And if I could just press you as well on the issue of TV licences for the over 75s. I mean, this is really punishing a part of the community that have faced isolation and loneliness through shielding during this crisis. As Culture Secretary, can't you force the BBC to cough up for this benefit, as the Prime Minister has repeatedly said? And if they won't, isn't it perhaps time to get rid of the BBC licence fee?
Lots of questions there to cover. Look, I think in respect of the experience of swimming pools, or indeed all of the rest of the areas we've reopened, I'd love us to be in a situation where pubs were as we know and love them, where you can crowd around the bars and people can shout and all those other things. The judgment we've taken with this and with swimming pools and elsewhere is that it's better to reopen with those restrictions and not reopen at all. Of course, it's going to take a while for people's confidence to build. It's rarely the case that you pull up the shutter and everyone comes rushing in. But equally, the experience in the UK and elsewhere is that over time, people have gained confidence and have started to engage more. But that's one of the reasons why the Chancellor announced this whole suite of measures to stimulate people to go out, whether it's the Eat Out to restart the economy, or whether it's in relation to the VAT cuts. In relation to the over 75s, the government has been clear all along that this was a good settlement. The BBC themselves described it as a good settlement, and we very much regret the fact that they have not kept over 75 licences free. In terms of further measures that we're taking, we're already consulting on decriminalising the licence fee, and of course decisions like this will have an impact on that, and we'll be announcing the outcome of that consultation over the course of the summer. In respect of the licence fee model as a whole, the charter review the charter set it out to 2027. But of course, all these factors will be considered as part of looking at the way forward. I think for the BBC, there are lots of challenges. I've already said the challenge of ensuring impartiality, the challenge of respecting all parts of the United Kingdom, and the challenge of how the BBC adapts what is essentially a linear model to all this sort of on-demand services. But any follow-up, Mesa?
Well, just on the